Thank you, Deb, for reading that. Need to make an adjustment here, so bear with me if I do that. Look at that, huh? Now I turn this gizmo over here. Can you hear me over there? Yeah. Can you hear me there? Okay, all right. So what's amazing about that text, I don't know if we forget it, but we might not think of Jesus our Lord in that way. Remember, it's always the incarnation is so critical to understanding of the life of Jesus Christ. Son of God. All right. Difficult to comprehend. Difficult for us to grasp in our finite minds how that could be, but it's true, and it did happen, and he declared that. But then we have him on the cross, and he says, Mother. Jesus was the son of Mary. Jesus had a mother, a flesh and blood mother, and it was Mary. And one powerful thing about Jesus was his relationships with all people, diverse groups. He met rich and poor, he met crippled, and he met very healthy people. He had friendships, wonderful friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He had his disciples who became famous. It's all about relationships with him, and he wanted to make sure that that was taken care of, even as he died on the cross. He said, Mom, there's your son from now on, because I'm going to heaven. And he also said to John, who was the disciple, she now becomes your mother. And he went and lived with her. So Jesus took care of these things in his relationships, and they meant so much to him. And I don't think we can dismiss that in our own lives. Whether you think you get along with people well or not, you can't escape the fact of relationships. It's just impossible. And that's what today's message is all about. And the second reading, I'll get into that right now, and then we'll develop that. Of course, it has to be in a personal way, because I obviously had women in my life that have influenced me and affected the man I became. And I don't think there's any man or woman out there that can escape that if you think about it deeply enough and long enough. Anyway, here's Paul's letter to Timothy. I think Jane has it behind you now on your screen. I thank God whom I serve with a pure conscience as my forefathers did. Without ceasing, I remember you in my prayers night and day. This is written to a young man, Timothy, who was becoming a pastor, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois, and then in your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded it is in you also. Therefore, I remind you to stir up the gift of God which is in you. That's a lovely phrase, to stir it up. Don't let it sit dormant and do nothing, but stir it up, which in you through the laying on of hands, his hands, as Paul passed that on to him, symbolically with the hands. For God does not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind. Amen. And may God always add to us understanding of his holy scriptures. Thank you. So, there's definitely a generational influence to one's faith and even understanding of love. To define love is tricky business. It can be different for all of us. As I said prior weeks to this, faith is personal. Your understanding of what love is in you and in others becomes personal. But I found out this one phrase has always stuck to me. Because you can say eloquently all you want and write poetically. And I'm going to close out today with a poem. It's an original poem. So if you fall asleep for the next 10 minutes, that's okay. But the last two I want you to stay completely awake. I want you to hear my personal poem to my mother. But now we can take a break. So this group, the title of today's message, and I think these women were the manifestation of love in my life. They were grounded in love, even when I didn't know what their love was or what it meant. They were all about it for me. And why I deserved it, not sure, except I was there, and these women decided that I was worthy of their love. So this is the little rock group I grew up with. Nellie, how did I put it up there? That Nellie, Millie, Tillie, Nellie, now. That's all true. Millie, Tillie, Nellie, now. They're either a rock group or a law firm. So to start at the beginning, without losing my way, Tillie, well, I started with Millie actually. Millie Shobin was what Ruth would be to this church. She was the Christian ed director at Lakewood Baptist Church where I grew up and went to church. And I was a rebellious, not listening, could care less type of child, 9, 10, 11. I wasn't obedient like you think I should be, or my parents tried, my grandmother tried, I'll get to her. But this woman, Millie Shobin, for some reason saw something and they took me under her wing. And after 2 years working with me, got me to stand up in front of the church during Children's Day, like we have here in a couple of weeks, and do the gospel nut. Now I'm still a gospel nut. Don't everybody laugh, no. So she taught me the gospel nut, which was this little walnut made out of plastic, but it had, you could pull ribbon on it. Ever heard of the gospel nut? You could pull ribbon out of it. And the ribbon had different colors. And the first, I had to explain this to the congregation like I'm explaining it to you now. And I don't know if I'm doing any better than I did back then. But the first color was black. That's us, the sinner. The second color was red. That's the blood of Christ to cover the sin. The third color was white, which is now we're free from sin, and he made us clean by his death on the cross, the blood. The last color was green, his grace, which colors us all for eternity. So those 4 colors, and I did that as a young boy, maybe 10, 11 years old. So that's Millie's great influence on me. I'll never forget her for that, and I can still see her in my mind's eye. The second one, Tillie was my grandmother on my mom's side. She was a Swede. She was born in Sweden. Her last name was Youngberg. She met my Irish grandfather over here. He was born in Ireland. So they got together. And what she developed in me, and I still have it today, is my sweet side. Oh, do I love sweets. Because of her. She could bake. And my parents both worked, so I'd go over to her house after school and get dropped off, me and my sister. And she'd always bake cookies. And they were homemade. Why wouldn't they be? And she either had, and the best one I'll say for last, peanut butter, not bad. Toll House, which you all know, chocolate chip. It was the raisins. That's my favorite. It's still good. But her best one was molasses. Oh, could she try? Can't quite get it together. Not the same. Good, but not the same. And I always go to my grandmother. When I came in from after school, we could smell it in the house, all of, aroma of cookies. And I'd always say, "What kind are they?" Nana, we called her Nana. She says, "Paul, is it going to make a difference? You're going to eat them anyway," which I did. Didn't matter. But she was I say the sweetness, I say that a little bit in jest, but she was sweet herself. She was just so kind and loving and do anything for us grandkids. She was the one who took us to church a lot because my mom was a deaconess and a Christian ed herself. My dad was sang in the choir of all things, and he was a moderator in the church, so they were so busy that she would be the one to take us to church. Now, next get to Nellie. My mom, I'll get to her, but my mom died fairly young in my life. So my dad remarried, and her name was Nellie. She was a McPherson, which became Nellie Rollins. And she taught me about generosity and duty. I'm in my, well, we met her when I was in my teens, but then in my 20s, Dad finally married her. And she was in the service, and she only died 2 or 3 years ago, and she was a wave. So she always has this sense of duty in her life, and doing the right thing for her country, and for her church, and for people in general. She just had this committed sense of duty in everything she did. The second part of her was her generosity. She herself, like Jim, she didn't have a lot of money. Whatever money she had, she shared it. And she shared it with her children, and she shared it with her neighbors. And when my dad met her, they shared things together. And then when in seminary, my dad dies. He passed away, of course, that was heartbreaking, and it was emotional. But I found out she took care of everything. When my dad left his trust, there were 3 children at the time. My brother has since gone, but there were 3 of us. And Dad left an equal amount of principal to each one of us children, James, my sister Jane, and Paul, me. And amounts were equal. It wasn't a great sum of money, but anyway, I come out of it, but it was their trust, but she was the executor of that trust. She's the executor. And we saw it, we got a copy of that will. And she could live off the principal, but she wasn't allowed to touch. She could live off the interest. You know what I'm talking, live off the interest, but she couldn't touch the principal. When she passed, the money would come to us. But she lived a long time. But that's not the point. The real point is this. We come out of seminary, and I want to tell you something. Everything we own is in a matador. You know what a matador is? No, you don't. Most people don't. It's a car, an old AMC Rambler. I owned a Matador. It was black, it was no dark brown and tan. How that survived those 2 years, I don't know, but it did. So we packed stuff, we come back, and she says to us, well, what are you going to do now? Where are you going to live? Well, my little brain, you know. Nellie lived in a nice home in Forestdale, which up there in Woonsocket. Fairly big cape, upstairs, efficiency apartment, bedroom, living room, had, toiletries, the kitchenette. I said, well, I thought until we got squared away, we'd live with you and help you out. We would try to pay something. I'm looking for work, both church work and secular work. She says, no, you won't. What? No, you won't, she says. She says, go look for a house. What? I'm going to free up your dad's money now. Now. We had enough money that he left in the trust that she wrote off so we could buy a house in Warwick, in Tidewater Drive. She taught me about, they say love is what love does. So she didn't preach love, she just did love. And she let us have that money, and that started us off on a whole adventure of home buying and having a home and a nestled place to live. And what a generous, lovely woman. And I can't thank her enough this day. So now I'm going for what she did to help us get rolling financially. So now to Mom. My mom, I know how it gets to you. What can I say? She taught me about beauty and fun in life. Beauty and fun. I remember her having conversations with my dad, and my dad wanted me to be responsible. No kidding, I get it. But you know what she would say many times? Paul, go out and have fun. Go out and have fun. Enjoy life. It's all. She knew about homework and stuff. She's a smart lady, and she was a beautiful woman. I'm not saying it because she's my mom, but thinking when she was best looking at was it Lockwood? Aldrich High School. When it was a high school, she was best looking. Irish colony, through and through. So my sister, I'm going to speed this up. So my sister, I could talk a lot about those things. Mom loved her gardens. We had gardens all around the perimeter of the house, the perimeter of the property. She had peonies, she had roses, she had daffodils, but her favorite thing, believe it or not, was daisies. She loved daisies. So my sister in 1970, Mom's still alive, she still lived 2 more years after that. My sister was getting married. Guess what the theme of the wedding was? Daisies, daisies everywhere. You know those trapezoids you have, or those murals? Like those big screen TVs today, 4 feet by 6 feet, whatever they are. We had a tapestry in our house that was daisies, just daisies. We had daisies coming out of daisies. We were eating daisy salad. And the girls wore daisy dresses that were in the wedding. Everything was daisies, daisies, daisies. I can still see it today. I texted my sister this morning. I said, "What do you remember most about Mom and your wedding?" She goes, "Daisies, daisies, daisies." When she got a theme, she just knocked it out. The theme was completely it. So, I call it a miracle. I call this a miracle. Miracle is a small thing. A soft miracle. 1987, we were fortunate enough to be able to have a home built in Western Coventry. Dirt road, only 3 houses on the road. The road was 1 mile long. A quick aside here, most people say to me, "How in the world did you drag your wife out there?" Just the opposite. She dragged me out there. She came from North Situate. I grew up in Warwick. She loved the country. She couldn't get there quick enough to get out of Warwick. Nothing against Warwick. I grew up there. But anyway, we started planting our gardens. The house was in the fall, so it wasn't until the next spring. We started doing the perimeter gardens. Like Joan loved the garden, I loved the garden. So we do it around the house and toward the back, perimeter before I went to the woods. And we started putting in our, daffodils and tulips and those tall phlox, all these different things. And I know this because, thank God, my mother walked me in the garden. And I know what the surrogated leaves of a young daisy looks like. Some people think they're weeds. They think it could be a weed. But it's got this little surrogated pointed leaf to it, and you look close, and it's not a weed. It's actually a flower. I go, oh my God, is that what I think it is? Next thing I know, we're planting. And come this time of year, end of May, boom, they're popping up. This yard had daisies all over it. I said, oh my God, what just happened? And I couldn't help, and you would too. I went right to that experience of my mother and the daisies. Not what she loved them as flowers, but what she did for the wedding. So, I wrote this poem. I wrote it in, I think, 2005 or so, for another Mother's Day service. And this is in honor of my mother, and I don't really think I have a talent for poetry. My dad did have a talent for poetry. He would write poetry, so maybe there's some latent talent there. But I wrote this, and I'll read it to you in honor of my mom, and then we'll close this message with this. It's called In Praise of Daisies, and I asked Jane to put it up so you can follow along as I read it. So this is my mom. In a time, and I know it's personal and all but your own reflections upon your mom, so please keep them dear to you. This just happens to be mine. In a time gone by, Mother tended the garden with me at her side. Peonies and roses and daffodils and tulips and daisies aplenty grew tall and full. There a gentle voice and a soft hand guided me among the colored petals, ripening buds, stubborn weeds, noisy flies, pesky ants, and busy bees too. Like the precious flowers in the garden, I too grew, and I grew away from time sharing in the daisy garden. Baseball, bikes, friends, and kites, no time to plant or weed, I'd say. Then soon off I'd go to work in college too. Daisies, as does time, move and moves quickly by. Now there are cars and girls and a career, and the garden, like its busy tender, has become tired too. Where flowers once flourished are too many weeds and grasses, but still the daisies persist, blooming high above those intruders. I pluck a cluster for the house, and for a mother too ill now to go where she once loved to go, with her flowers and her love for her young son. As her days became fewer, she would tend to us differently, with a touch, a smile, and prayers. Prayers for togetherness, prayers for love, and for a future. She would soon pass to her place of rest and heavenly bliss. Seasons since have come and gone, and I'm older now than my mother ever would be. And now I tend the garden where daisies rise to heights I know, and even as I wonder about many things, I should not be surprised that I would find myself among such friends. And on this Mother's Day, the wonder is revealed, for it has become a lifted praise to heavenly places. I am where my mother would be, and hope that I also would be. My mother still tends to me, for I am among the daisies. Her prayers for me of togetherness and love were answered in a future I could not see, for I am where I should be, to the delight of God's design and a mother's love, which now I can clearly see. Amen. Thank you for listening. Let us stand together and sing our closing hymn, Happy the Home Where God is in it.